Before we get started, let me give you a bit of context so you know where I come from. I've been making games sporadically since I'm 11 years old. I remember vividly the moment I realized that those video games I was enjoying playing so much were not simply etched to disc magically. I was reading an older issue of LEGO magazine and I saw an article about the latest Bionicle game. I don't know if you remember those. It had that huge background image of a Bionicle T-posing in the software window, and I assume it must have been Maya or something like that. Someone, a human, had to design and create them. This was a huge revelation for me. I was 8 years old at the time, by the way. Later, when I started to play Minecraft in 2010 or something, I was wondering how I could make my own game. I was beginning to learn English, so I googled the only two words I knew that could potentially yield results: game maker. And as you guessed it, I saw the software called Game Maker 8. I jumped on the download button and followed the included tutorial. It took me about a week as I was very limited in my English reading abilities. This sparked a huge interest in me. I started trying to make games, copying right and left, and never finished one single project. I never really made it past moving a character in an empty room for a long time, and I had absolutely no game theory or anything of the sort. I just knew I had to have a character and wing it. 2 years later, I decided to jump right back at it. I had a computer class project that I had complete liberty over, so I decided to create a 2D version of Minecraft. This way, I didn't need to redesign the game. It was already fun and entertaining. I simply had to focus on the technical aspect, right? So I ripped textures with Photoshop, made my characters move, imported sound, created very basic blocks, implemented block breaking and placing, and you see the picture. I even implemented water at the end of my project, which I was very proud. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to show you as I long lost the drive in which my only copy of the game ever was. I then briefly tried Unreal Engine 3 and Unity 4, then Unreal Engine 4 and Unity 5 as years went by, but never did I finish a damn game. I don't come from total nihil, but I'm not very far from it. Now, onto what you actually came for. I work during weekdays, so all my new game dev time is spent in the evening and sometimes, all the time, bleeds late into the night, so I began my journey on Monday. I watched GD Quest's intro to GDScript and I found out that GDScript is a variant of Python, which I already followed courses recently, so I know the core basics. This should make it ever slightly easier. I didn't learn anything, if not the specific syntax of variable assignation. I didn't learn anything, if not the specific syntax of variable assignation in Godot, as it was course about the basics like variables, data types, and booleans and such. I then went on a part 2 of the tutorial. This is where my motivation went to shit. I legitimately didn't understand like more than 30% of what he was teaching. I tried and I went through like 20 minutes of the video. My brain was on fire. Tired and somewhat disillusioned, I went to bed. I resumed the tutorial and struggled to keep up again. I just am not a programmer and I felt like the tutorial was aimed at this very specific audience. I was getting demotivated very quickly. I then went to find refuge in the comment, and there I found my lifeline. A guy clarified that this was more of a programming language overview aimed at seasoned programmers looking to transition from another engine. This comforted me as I didn't fit this description at all. I left the video and went seeking help elsewhere. I remembered that Godot had a step-by-step guide to the engine. I glanced over it a couple years ago, so I was familiar with it, and I went with that. This was my second lifeline. It was laid down very simplistically with analogies and such, and it was very easy for me to understand. It boosted my morale by a considerable amount. I learned about scenes, nodes, instancing, inheritance, and such, which just clicked for me. It was so intuitive. It made so much sense. more than any other engine that I had tried in the past. I was grateful to have a bit of motivation for a change. Later that night, I went to bed feeling better than the night before. I continued with Godot's step-by-step guide. It was very interesting. I went through the scripting part with some difficulty, but I made it through and made my first result. A button that when it clicked, changed some text. Well, it doesn't feel like anything, but I felt momentum. And I tried to see if Mrs. had a tutorial of my level that I could follow and adapt with my past game making experience. So I was looking for a platformer or something alike, because I knew those. I found a very basic one and got a bit more familiar with the engine's interface through the video, but I couldn't help but feel discouraged as I needed to think, rewatch, and like up to 5 times in the video to grasp what he was showing. I could not for the life of me figure out where I was in my learning journey. I couldn't tell if I was anywhere. I didn't feel like I achieved anything considerable in like almost 3 days. I didn't understand a lot of things and I couldn't tell if I was just bad. If I should instead focus on another engine that is aimed towards maybe non-programmers, or if I should drop the whole thing and focus on something else and stop losing my time. I went to sleep tired and feeling very down. As I was laying in bed, I couldn't help but feel I was on the wrong track, that I would end up losing my motivation sooner or later, as it was fading pretty quickly. I had to find something else, another track to follow. While at work during the day, I found out an article on GDQuest's website titled Game Dev with Godot, Beginner Edition, all in caps. I decided I would give it a try when I get back home. After reflecting a lot, I figured out that I should keep pushing. I have to give myself momentum. The hardest part of pushing a rock is getting it to move, isn't it? Momentum is a real thing. I was stressed out that I wouldn't have a cool result to show by the end of the week for you to watch, but I realized this. My failures probably will bring more value to aspiring game dev like me to realize they aren't alone. Getting into game development is hard, man. From my experience in the past with Game Maker, I probably spent 80% of my time not knowing what the hell I was doing. But that 80% was shrinking by the week. 80% was at some point 78%. 78% was 75 at some point, and then 72. Slowly but surely, I was getting tiny concepts left and right, and at some points, all those tiny concepts I was picking up all clicked together, and I was able to make a simple platformer by myself with no reference and no tutorial. I guess it'll be like that with Godot, but on a steeper learning curve. I can't wait for my first project to take shape. I'm eager to learn. My only fear is that I won't produce interesting content for a while. So back home, I started this tutorial. It is going well. I feel like I'm going to accomplish something. Although I thought I had lost my time during these last days, I found that my brain had learned several things about the engine, like hotkeys, inheritance, and some of the main features and tasks you find yourself doing constantly. This made me realize something. When learning, you're never losing time. Don't underestimate the power of your brain. This thing absorbs energy like a bad bitch. So, tonight was much better. I learned how to import a tile set and create individual sprites to use in my scene. That was the part I was impressed with. I managed to get a box to move right and left. I couldn't get it to jump though. I'll have to take a better look tomorrow. I mean, it went well today. I felt like information was being absorbed a lot easier than in the past days. The GD script part was making a lot more sense than it used to. I like the way it is done. The more I use it, the more I feel like everything is pretty much as intuitive as you'd imagine. I really dig the whole node and scene concept. If you understand what a function is, you understand what a node is. I don't really have much to say tonight as it's very late and I have to go to bed. So this week was both easier and much harder than I thought. One thing I remember from this week is, even if it gets hard and discouraging, sometimes taking a step back, reflect, on why I feel this way, and taking a break helps me a whole bunch. From my first week's experience, all I can say to my fellow total beginner wannabe game makers, just push it. Push on. Like, do it. Don't get defeated over a piece of software. Make it work towards your goal. I sure like to repeat myself that. Well, thank you for sticking by. I'll see you in the next Noob Game Dev entry next week. In the meanwhile, keep creating and don't give up. Peace out.